So there has been some very big news for the Edmonton Oilers this week. And you know what? When the biggest news happening with your team is not that you just set an all time record for the longest winning streak by a Canadian franchise in NHL history, when you have bigger news than that, well, then you know that it's been a pretty big news week. And indeed it has been, as during this past week. Cory Perry, formerly of the Anaheim Ducks, formerly of the Dallas Stars, of the Tampa Bay Lightning, most recently of the Chicago Blackhawks, uh, has found his landing place after being cut loose by the Chicago Blackhawks. And yeah, his landing place happens to be in Edmonton. I think that there were a lot of people that were not terribly surprised by that. I can't really say that I'm surprised by that. I've got a lot of thoughts about it. I've had a lot of thoughts about it the whole time. I am definitely reluctant to say that it's a great idea, and there are reasons for that. But it is what has come to pass. It is the thing that has come to be, and so now, as fans, we do need to get behind this player and hope for his success, because his success will be a big part of the success of this team. I can still say that I do still have some questions about exactly what the heck it was that went on in Chicago that got him terminated from his contract there. Uh, that's not something that happens very often. There are very specific circumstances under which a team can just terminate a player's contract like that. And so that's pretty concerning, especially from a player like Cory Perry that has some of his history. And I think it is fair to say that we should hope that the Oilers organization has done their due diligence on this player, has reached out to Chicago and reached out to the Cory Perry camp. I mean, obviously, they've reached out to the Cory Perry camp because they signed him. But hopefully, they've done their investigatory work and found out what the heck it was that went on. I really don't think that it was what it was rumored to be. I don't think that Connor Bedard's mom really has any place in this, but so far as I'm aware, it could be. I don't know. I don't know if it is. I don't know if it isn't. I'm going to assume that it isn't. I'm assuming that it isn't. I guess that's the best way to say it. And certainly on paper, it's not a bad addition to the team. I mean, if it was strictly on paper, this would look like a fantastic addition to the team. I mean, this is a guy who has won a Stanley Cup over the past few years. He has been on teams that have been all the way to the Stanley Cup finals and then lost. But they went all the way to the finals, which is more than what the Edmonton Oilers have done over that period of time. So that's fair to say. I do have a share of other concerns. I mean, some of the dirty shots that Cory Perry puts on other players. Some of the penalties that he takes. I mean, he has developed a habit of taking bad penalties in big moments of big games. I mean, I think at this point we've all seen the video of him basically, walking out of the Winter Classic, after getting tossed out of there for a dirty hit. Little things like that. I'm not really of the mind that the team would necessarily be better off for a player that does that sort of thing. But if Cory Perry is committed to weeding that stuff out of his game and buckling down and becoming the kind of hockey player that he has been, the kind of hockey player that he still can be, well, then he's a very welcome addition to this locker room. Now, it is true that the Edmonton Oilers have had a lot of luck in the past with these player rehab projects. I mean, with Zach Cassian, with Craig McTavish, Ken Linseman, and of course, most recently and most famously, Evander Kane. So there is that speaking in Cory Perry's favor. And he is a player that even at this stage of his career can still play up and down the lineup, and players like that are always good to have. But even with all of that in mind, it still would be very reassuring if we were to find out exactly what the heck it was. Well, at least something about what had gone on in Chicago. I mean, I have had I have had quite a bit to say about it over the past couple of weeks here since Cory Perry, exited the player assistance program. There were a few things that I said that were definitely, a little bit, maybe a little bit extreme. I think at one point I even said that I would let Mike Hoffman onto this team before I allowed Cory Perry onto this team. And no, that's not true. That's not true. I couldn't see myself kneecapping Cory Perry to keep him out of the locker room. Paying Tanya Harding's ex-husband to reprise some of his earlier work. No, I couldn't really see myself doing that to Cory Perry. And the truth is that there have definitely been times when, a person would have had no problem whatsoever with Cory Perry joining this team. It almost happened all the way back in the 2000s. All the way back when, Mike Comrie was holding out, didn't want to re-sign with the team. He was still a UFA, he was still an RFA. And so then they needed to find someplace to trade him to, and it almost became a trade to Anaheim. They had it all worked out that first it was going to be Mike Comrie for Joffrey Lupul, and then Anaheim changed their mind, and then they said, well, we could do Mike Comrie for Cory Perry, and Anaheim was willing, but then the Oilers make the just doofus move of going back to Mike Comrie and telling him that, we'd like you to pay back some of your bonus money that we paid you, your signing bonus for your entry level contract. We'd like some of that money back. And of course he said no. And so then that wound up killing the deal. And then eventually, when they finally offloaded Mike Comrie, it was for Jeff Woodcup and a bunch of draft picks. It wound up being like Robbie Schremp, and then they squandered Robbie Schremp's potential. And I think hindsight pretty much tells us all that the franchise would have been so much better off if they had just never made that ridiculous ask of Mike Comrie, and let that deal go through, and then had Cory Perry at center between Ryan Smith and Al Mashemsky. Damn, that would have been a pretty good line. Definitely would have been a much better time for the fans of this franchise than spending all those years wondering what the hell Robbie Schremp was still doing in Scranton. Those were odd times. But regardless of what anybody might think of it now, what anybody might have thought of it 2 weeks ago, Cory Perry, he is here with this franchise now, and we do have to make the best of it. If you're adding a guy who, by all measures, in terms of what he can produce on the ice, is still a pretty good player in this league, even at 38 years old, and you're adding that to a team that just won 14 games straight, trying to make a run towards that 17 game record set by the Penguins all the way back in the 90s. Well, at least on paper, it is a pretty good deal. And if that turns out to be exactly what it is, it puts his team over the top for winning Stanley Cup. Well, then I guess that anybody that didn't agree with this really ought to just swallow their pride at this point and just do their best, kind of put the best effort towards supporting this player and this team